Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
It's time for the Bonnie Sher Show, a whirlwind of wit, wisdom, celebrity, and the boomer life. With a little bit of this and a lot of that and so much more you don't want to miss, here's Bonnie.
Well, hello, and thanks for tuning in and joining us. Please call in and we can all chat. I'd like to first of all say my thanks to Wayne Cobham for our super duper theme song. I am Bonnie Sher. I am your guide through the boomer life. I'm your guide through the world of celebrity and the world of the T1D community. Today's guests, fascinating interview coming up with director, producer, and writer Matt Cimber is here today. And we have also a member of our T1D community as my T1D co-host, and that's the lovely and funny Susan Sussman. So if you have a question or a comment, I invite you to call in at 323-843-2826, or you can follow us on Twitter at hashtag BSHER Radio. So now let's just settle on in and say hello, please, to my first guest, Matt Cimber.
All in applause. It's wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie.
Isn't applause wonderful?
Yes, it really is.
It makes a lousy day better.
Yeah,
I could write a song. Applause.
In my line of business, we very rarely get applause, except possibly when we're getting some kind of an award. But it's always the actors like yourself. They're the ones that get all the applause.
You want me to write a part for you, Matt?
Oh, I thought you
would. You
like? Would it be sad? No,
never.
I hope not.
Never. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt, I have known, I will tell you, a long time, a very, very, very long time, and my dad was in the film business, and that's how I first met Matt. But, Matt, you have done everything. I was reading about all of your works, and I read that actually you didn't start in film. You started on stage.
In New York, yes. I started, actually, I started when I was 14 years old. I was very fortunate because I had a sister who was the genius of the family. She was 7 years older than me. She graduated Juilliard when she was 18. She was this brilliant girl that I hated, really hated. And she bossed me around. And on Saturdays, my mother taught school. She taught sewing at Singer Sewing. So she didn't want to leave me alone for too many hours. So she made my sister take me to Carnegie Hall every Saturday when my sister was getting lessons. My sister decided to become an opera singer, and she became a very successful, famous one, actually. But she was coaching on Saturdays on 56th Street and 7th Avenue in New York, if you're familiar. There was a group of studios that everyone used. So she would have to take me there, and I'd get bored, and I'd be sitting in the hallway. And across the hall was this Russian lady named Vera Solovyova, who, when I first saw her, she was already ancient, and she was giving this acting class, and I didn't know that she was this famous Russian from the Moscow Arts Theater. And one day, it was hot and there was no air conditioning naturally in Carnegie Hall. She invited me to come and sit in the class. And I did, and I watched the class. And before you know it, I was there every Thursday night as well as Saturday. And she never charged me. And I would fix up the chairs afterwards, pick up the papers, whatever. And lo and behold, her husband was a man named Michael Chekhov. And Michael Chekhov, of course, was the great disciple of Stanislavski. And so I had 2 years of Michael Chekhov and his physical approach to acting. And then he went off to Hollywood. And I stayed there. I ended up at the actor studio in the directors group with Elia Kazan and a lot of other directors. And then eventually I went to Columbia. I studied theater. And when I got out, I was very lucky. I was working in Yale Drama Department, and a postgraduate student had written a play called The Ignorance Ants, A-N-T-S, Abroad, a comedy, obviously. And everyone in the group said, "Who's going to direct this?" And nobody raised their hand, so I raised my hand. And they said, "Okay, Matt." Well, it turned out the two actresses, Alice Pierce, who was a very famous actress, had co-starred with Frank Sinatra in Anchors Aweigh, and another British actress were the two stars of the comedy. And I'm the director, and I'm out there, and I'm feeling my way through, and they're helping me more than anything else what to do. The play opened in New Haven, got wonderful reviews, and they said it's going to go to New York. They said, "Do you want to go to New York with it?" And I said, "Goodbye," and I was off. From that time on, I actually, I did the Cocteau plays, which nobody had ever done in the United States. I did a play. I became very good friends with a writer named William Inge, who wrote Picnic, and he was a wonderful guy. And after doing 4 plays, revivals on Broadway, I did about 4 or 5 other off-Broadway plays, and they were doing very well. And then one day, the Broadway theater, can't remember the name of the theater, announced that they were going to bring Hollywood movie star Jay Mansfield to come to Broadway for a short time to do a revival of Bus Stop, which had been written by my friend Bill Inge. And so, and they said that it paid, the director's fee paid $2,500. In those days, that could have paid my rent for a whole year. So, sure enough, I asked Bill, and Bill said, "Well, there's nothing I could do about it." He said, "It's a William Morris package." He said, "But I'll set you up with the agent." So I went up to see this agent, and he was very complimentary. He said, "I've seen a couple of your plays." He said, "I'm sure you could do this." He said, "We have one problem." He said, "Miss Mansfield has director approval and all the actors' approval." I said, "Well, what do we do?" He said, "Well," I could arrange for you to meet her. So I went to this hotel in New York, and I'm trying to remember the name of it on Broadway. I went to the hotel to meet her at 6 o'clock at night. She was the next day leaving for 6 weeks to do a film in France with Maurice Chevalier. And I waited in the lobby, and sure enough, in came Jay Mansfield with her jeans on and whatnot, and looking very unglamorous. And she had just been running around Greenwich Village. We went upstairs. We talked about New York, and she told me how much she loved New York. And finally she said, listen, I'm sorry I have to cut this short, but I have to leave tomorrow morning for Rome for the film. So I got up, I went to the door, I didn't know what to say. And I said, well, what about the play? And she said, oh, you direct it. I said, what about the cast? And she said, well, no, you're the director. You picked the cast. So that was it. And, of course, the play went very well. There were a couple of very well-known people, and unfortunately I'm ashamed that I forget the name of the girl who played the waitress. The owner of the diner was the girl who went on that TV series where they each had 5 children. She was
you're talking about Florence Henderson?
Huh? No. She wasn't. It was the one who played her maid.
Oh, Ann B. Davis.
Ann B. Davis was in that, and that's where she got discovered. And the girl who eventually played the blind girl in a big film, and I can't remember the name of the film. So it turned out very well. I became very close to Jane. And
I'd say,
and we came to Hollywood, and when I came to Hollywood, she said, you're so good with scripts, and you're such a good director. We don't have directors who work with actors here. She said, and I think you should. I said, but I know nothing about film. And she was a contract player at Fox, so she said she got me a job at Fox as an AD. And she asked everybody loved her on the Fox lot. And she said, I want him to spend 2 weeks in editing, 2 weeks with the camera crew, 2 weeks with the sound crew, and 2 weeks with costumes, And so every day I was going to work, and I was being instructed by guys who were the great crews of the 30s and 40s in Hollywood, these older guys. And so it really was a wonderful experience. And I don't know how long it took me to tell you about it, but
it was worth every minute.
Yeah, and since then I've done.
Excuse me 1 second. I think talking about your closeness with Jane, and when I sort of chortled, turns out she thought he was such a good director and such a fine man. She married him. Just saying. So you kind of,
yes,
so you did
true.
develop quite a closeness,
yes,
I would imagine.
And we have a wonderful son named Tony. But I went on with films. I've done I went to Europe. I made a lot of films in Europe, and I think that the most exciting things that I enjoy doing were the documentaries. I lived 10 years in Israel. And I worked in Jordan, I worked in Egypt, but I was based in Israel. I did the Dead Sea Scrolls. I did a lot of wonderful, and that was the greatest fun I used to have. I would stop in New York, pick up a crew from NYU, kids in postgraduate, take them to the Middle East with me, and they'd shoot, and we.
It's amazing.
Yeah, fun. I did 50 hours.
Quite a career. Well, I want to bring us to present time, and I think it's fascinating that now at this point you've written a play.
Yes, this is very strange. I had to have an eye operation. And so they replaced the lenses of my eyes with plastic lenses. And so I was really very disoriented during the whole period of 90 days. And I said, I have a screenplay that we're working on now. I said, I never wrote a stage play. And I've always been fascinated by Hedy Lamarr, who had come from Vienna, and Adolf Hitler. So I wrote a play called Hitler and Hedy, which was a dinner that supposedly took place just before she came to America, with Adolf, who was a fellow Austrian, like she was. And I think it has a very good theme. I'm a heavy one with theme. These kids come along, they want to write, and they don't understand what a theme is about or how the characters connect to the theme. And the theme is, it's the first time I did a film about 3 or 4 years ago called Miriam, which I shot in Lithuania and here, and it was this actual story of a woman who lived through the Holocaust, a fabulous woman, and then she lived through the Russians as well. So I had a taste of a lot of it, of the period and the time. And to me, the Jewish situation from the early 30s was always one of defense and hide. And so I wrote a play now where I think that the use of being a Jew becomes a weapon. And this girl uses it as a weapon, if you know what I mean. And very cleverly and very smartly. And I don't know if I should be saying this, but also that Hedy Lamarr was Jewish.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and she never told her children until she died in the year 2000 at the age of 85. Did she tell them finally that they were Jewish? But it's a fabulous story and a fabulous history.
Well, speaking of fabulous stories and fabulous histories, I really think you're the guy. I mean, anybody who wants to be in the industry. I mean, we have to look to people like yourself who found an interest and saw a light and explored it. And having such a good bottom line education, as I'm sure being educated at Columbia and being in that New York scene in those years, I just think it's fabulous, and I think that
I was
it
lucky.
would do our listeners well to do some reading on Mr. Cimber. If you go on to IMDb, which is how I learned a lot more, that'll give it. But also, Matt, how can our listeners rather, follow you and know what's going on with you?
Well, I'm not sure, but I have 5 films. What had happened when I was shooting Miriam, this film, we were setting up in a concentration camp area, and I was waiting for the lights and everything to get together. And then my production manager came in, and I said, "Are we ready?" And he said, "No, not yet." And I said, "What are you talking about? Why? How much time?" And he said, "Well, we have somebody out there talking to the crew, giving them a lecture." I said, "Who is it?" He said, "Quentin Tarantino." I said, "What the hell's he doing here?" And they said, "I don't know, but he's talking about you and what a fan he is of your films, that he grew up watching your films." So I went out, and there was Quentin, and we talked for a while, and since then I've met with him on several occasions, and he always says, "You know, I have every film that you ever made." He says, "I even have a 16 millimeter. Do you remember Lola Falana?"
Of course.
I made an action film with Lola Falana, and she, I think they're signaling you.
They want me to become more intimate with my microphone.
Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, I had made this film with Lola, and actually, well, we'll go to another subject. I don't want to bring up Lola. Poor girl died so early.
Well, of course, I knew Lola from my days with Sammy Davis Jr. Lola was the number one opening act for him for many, many years. So Lola got the first choices, and then if she couldn't make it, I went.
And you know what's funny is that Sammy financed the film.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
he didn't mention.
He and Cy Marsh. And
Wow, are you
they
going back?
And he came to me and he said, "Will you write a film for her?" He said, "We're going to build her career." She was wonderful in it, and the film did good business. The problem was at the time, we tried to push it a crossover film, but at the time the theater owners wouldn't put a black film in a white neighborhood back then. So it was kind of sad. She never got the full exposure that she needed. But anyway, with Quentin now, so what has happened? How do you keep in touch? Quentin's influence, all my films that I made in the late 60s and early 70s are all being renovated. I call it renovated, not restored, but they're being renovated, and they're being re-released. They just released Arrow Films in London, just released The Witch Who Came from the Sea, who stars Millie Perkins. I don't know if you remember Millie Perkins. And the picture I did with Stacy Keach and Orson Welles called Butterfly. That's been re-released, and all because of him. Now, he had this wonderful 100th anniversary of Orson Welles, and he has a theater here in Los Angeles on Beverly Boulevard, that he's renovated. And so he had the big celebration there, and he played Butterfly. And it was quite an occasion. It was really kind of terrific.
Well, I hope everything continues to be terrific for you, because you're a terrific guy.
Well, thank you. And you're the amazing one, not me. You're what a cute little girl, and now you're a cute lady. You were adorable.
You heard it first.
I always wanted to go to her husband's house to do
my
her father's house to do business, just to see her. 17, she comes sashaying in the office, under 100 different. 17, she was a hot number, let me tell you. Yes, and she had a mother who was really. I wish I had a camera back then. I would have had the greatest natural film of all time. Her mother was a piece of work. Fabulous.
Well, we'll be able to chat much more at another time. Matt, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
For taking your time and coming to say hello.
It's wonderful to have seen you again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Before we go to break, Matt, it was just wonderful to have you here. You are listening to the Bonnie Sher Show. Please join the conversation. You can call us at 323-843-2826, or you can follow the hashtag. That's hashtag BSHER Radio. Coming up, my shout out on who got it right and who I think should be ashamed. But let's go to break now with a song that's one of my favorites and really sums up my feelings. And this is Rosemary Clooney's Someone to Watch Over Me. Take it away.
There's a saying old says that love is blind. Still we're often told, seek and ye shall find. So I'm gonna seek a certain lad I've had in mind. Looking everywhere, haven't found him yet. He's the big affair I cannot forget. Only man I ever think of with Tell me, where is the shepherd for this lost lamb? There's a somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he turns out to be someone who'll watch over me. I'm a little lamb who's lost in the wood. I know I could always be good to one who'll watch over me. Although he may not be the man some girls think of as handsome, to my heart he carries the key. Won't you tell him, please, to put on some speed, follow my lead? Oh, how I need someone to watch over me.
Is this mic okay? Okay.
Welcome back to the Bonnie Sher Show. Joining me in this segment is Susan Sussman, a member of the Type 1 diabetes community from Virginia, the great state of Virginia. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Susan,
Yeah.
you're living with Type 1 diabetes. Would you share your story with us, please?
Yeah, I became diabetic. I was in my 20s, living abroad in Israel, actually. And all of a sudden, I started losing a lot of weight. I was only 110 pounds, went down to 92. And although I was a young girl who wanted to be skinny, it was very uncomfortable. I wasn't looking very good. I was always thirsty. I had all the classic signs. My sight was blurring and urinating a lot. I was drinking a lot because I was thirsty. It was a vicious cycle. So I went to the doctor, and he did some tests, and they found my blood sugar was like 285, and the maximum was supposed to be like 120 at the time. So I immediately started an insulin regimen. They taught me with an orange how to inject myself.
we all did those oranges. If you were lucky, somebody brought you some vodka. You could
Right,
inject it,
yeah. Yeah. And in those days, I think there were 2 kinds of insulin I had to take, something like that. I don't remember. And the needles were long. It was just a nightmare. Needles were longer, and I was always scared of needles. It was the furthest thing from my mind. My grandfather had diabetes, type 1. He got it when he was in his 60s. But, you know, when you're young and having a good time, you don't expect something like that to happen.
Certainly not.
And I had also had a huge emotional breakup with a boyfriend who I was going to marry. And they say that if it is, you know, if it's a possibility that you could have it, you go through some kind of an emotional shock, or like a lot of women get it when they're pregnant, it's possible that it can come out, and that's exactly what happened to me.
Well, definitely, there is a school of thought that it's like the completion of the perfect storm. You already had the propensity, you already had the markers,
Right.
And that's what made it kick off. I mean,
Right.
that's what, they talk about epidemiology of the flus and things like that. I remember just prior to my diagnosis, there was one of those wacky bird flus.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 1968, and the whole country was sick. But there, as I've done some research, there were a lot of, a real large concentration, especially in the center of the country,
Mm-hmm.
with diabetes. But yes, absolutely, there does seem to need to be that perfect storm which is created. The one I can't figure out, though, is when you hear about children 14 months, 16
Getting it.
months.
Yeah.
I that kind of weakens my theory a little bit. I don't know who knows how they perceive trauma. I don't
Right.
remember back that far. I
Right.
remember last week, but not
Right.
back then.
Yeah.
So your journey, do you use a pump? Do you use a sensor? What makes your diabetes most manageable? Do you have any tricks that you've learned? I think all of us kind of find our way.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you do that
Yeah.
makes your life easier? Tell us about
Well,
that.
when I was first diagnosed and I heard about all the horrible complications, it was like one of the second or third cause of death. I said, "Hey, I only have one pair of eyes. I don't want to lose them. I only have 2 arms and 2 legs. I don't want, that's what I heard about in those days." So I swore that I would do my best to always be a good diabetic or a healthy diabetic. So like a couple years later, I started exercise walking, and I don't mean crazy walking. I just mean 3-4 times a week. I found I would walk on my lunch hour from work, or I'd put a half hour, like it's sort of like make it like a medication prescription as part of your day. And I've always found that the times that I stop walking, maybe for a week, 2 weeks, my blood sugars go wacko. But when I am walking 3-4 times a week, for some reason they seem to fall into place. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but they're in better control, and that's because you get more oxygen in your blood, and there's a whole thing about science about that. I did start on the insulin pump I think it's about 9 years now. And I think that's awesome. I don't have to take you're just injecting something subcutaneously once a week or twice a week instead of giving myself injections 3-4 times a day. I test at least 6 times a day. I have a glucometer, and I have a mini one in my purse. The glucometer I have is connected to the pump so that they work in sync, but the one in my purse is just a mini, and I use it when I'm out and about. I do stand-up. I go to clubs, so I always I test before I get on stage or before I get into the club to see how I am. And if I'm normal or not, I'll have maybe something with sugar in it, that kind of a thing.
I do something similar. I would let myself be a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I want, other than having a heart attack on stage, that was enough.
Yeah.
But even thinking, I don't even want to think about it.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll let it drift a little bit higher.
Right.
But, I think that also we know that food drives our glucose. But I think that it's also important to remember that emotions can drive your glucose
Right.
as much as what were those Krispy Kreme donuts. I have looked, where intellectually I would assume, which is a dumb thing to do, that I should be at one thing, but due to the stress or something else that's going
Yeah.
on. And it's very difficult to know how much insulin you give for stress.
Right, right.
You know, we don't have a chart that looks like that.
Right.
So there really is in our lives so many things to keep our eye on, and then you get on stage and you get to release all of that. I think that's wonderful. Do you ever talk about your
About
let me hear one.
Oh gosh.
No pressure. The pressure's in the diabetes.
Well, one of the ones I do is, which actually happened. I told the story a little bit on stage, and these guys that were former drug addicts came up to me afterwards. And said, "Oh, gee, you're so lucky. You get to shoot up every day." You know, so I said,
I love a happy audience.
So then I went into something like it's insulin, you know, idiot, you know. But my favorite drug is sugar.
Of course.
You know, I go to the dollar store and buy nickel bags of Nerds and M&Ms, grind them and snort them. They've come out with Jiffy peanut butter powder now. I don't even have to grind it. Put it on my broccoli. I melt down Dove bars and mainline them with Juicy Juice. Things like that. And the in our household, the funny thing is on Thanksgiving, my husband makes the turkey and everything. I do the desserts. And people say, it's enough sugar, you know, no more desserts. I make cheesecake and cookies. No more desserts, Susan. I say, it's okay. I got insulin upstairs. I'll hit you up. No problem.
Well, my dear, that's the attitude to have.
Yeah.
So tell us, how do you think that your diabetes... Now, you tell me you've been doing stand-up now, what, 6 years, 7 years, something like
about
that?
5, something like that.
What got you... What were you doing? What did you augment? How did you...
For a living, I'm a real estate appraiser. I appraise houses. So I was in the middle of... I was doing very well during the boom.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, my fax machine stopped one day. And I got very depressed. And I started, I decided instead of waiting till I retire to take classes, you know, we all like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to do this, you know. I decided to take a comedy writing class at some writers center. So when he says, oh, well, after eight weeks of this class, you know, you're going to be doing a 5-minute stand-up routine. I went, what? Because I thought it was just to add some comedy into some fiction I was writing. Uh-huh. So I, you know, kicked and screamed, and I ended up really enjoying it. It was something out of the box for me. I enjoy writing. I enjoy, you know, trying to write a punchline. Plus, and then I have my blog. You know, I didn't talk about that. That I write in there all about my diabetes with that too.
And where can our listeners find said blog?
Diabeticmaven.com.
There you have it, diabeticmaven.com. Are you on Facebook?
Yes, I am. Just at Susan Sussman. Yeah.
Okay. And how else can our viewers follow you? Do you tweet?
I do tweet a little bit when
You
there's
tweet
something
a
to
little
tweet about.
bit?
It's just I'm not, as a boomer, I don't like telling everybody my business all the time. Or
I must have gone to a different boomer school.
Yes.
My son just shakes.
I am
wondering-
on Facebook a lot, though, because my comedy community is on Facebook a lot. So I think that's where I usually put what I'm doing when. And I'll be hosting in Newport News at Kazi's Comedy Club May 20th, the weekend of May 20th, and June 10th. So
The only way I really know about Newport News is they used to have a catalog of clothing. Did you ever see that? No. That's an aside. You can tell that I'm a shopper.
yeah.
Susan, I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
And great health. And stay in touch with us. Let us know how you're doing. If you're going to be back in L.A., please let me know and come on back and talk to us. Or you can just pick up a phone sometime and call in. Like, you can hear the phones going crazy here today. And let us know what you think.
Great.
And I do hate to end this segment, but it's time for my soapbox.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Pretty spiffy. First, I'd like to do my shout out today to dance music producer and record company owner Rick Giannatos. He and his folks have created something called the Peace Project. Remember, hang on in there, baby. Yeah. So God love them. And this is all on behalf and for more acknowledgement and light to be placed upon the fight for victims of violence and crime. Starting next week, the next 3 shows will all have visiting artists from this project, singers from the project, who will be discussing this. And think about it. Take a picture of yourself with the peace sign. That's what we're asking you to do. For starters, go ahead and tag me in the photo with a hashtag, the Peace Project. Now, for my shoutdown. Well, this just confounds me. The United States Senate has gone home without taking the vote on the funding for the Zika virus. The Democratic senators have been behind separate emergency funding, while the Republicans clearly have not. The GOP leaders insist on considering the money as part of the ongoing 2017 months after Congress first received a funding request from the White House. There was one of the senators, and that was Senator Patty Murphy, who's the ranking member on the Senate Labor HHS subcommittee, said on Thursday that some Republicans think that it's fine to wait weeks or months. She added, Republicans in Congress might be able to wait that long, but families across the country simply cannot wait. If you have an opinion, feel free to sound off or let me know you agree with me on my blog at www.bonniesher.com/blog and sound off. Well, that's our show for today. I hope you'll return next week for another 50 minutes of trips through the world of Bonnie, the world of entertainment, the world of diabetes, and the great boomer generation. I'd like to thank my guests again today for they give me all my notes. Thank you. For sharing their time and their thinking with you. So come on back next week, and until then, you can follow the #1 Bonnie Sher on Twitter, and you could like the Bonnie Sings Lena. You know, I think you guys are getting a cut on the jewelry. I swear to God, I won't forget it. It's just not coming up yet. But here we come. And just in case you were wondering what I'm wearing today, this is a stone called labradorite. And this is another one of Corey. With this labradorite necklace, which again is all hand wrapped in 14 karat gold. If you'd like to get in touch with Corey and find out how Sher.com, drop down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a link to Corey. Click, and you too can be wearing Corey's jewels. Well, for my friends old and know, many of you know the enormous amount of influence Sammy Davis Jr. had upon me and my career and my sensibilities. And he was my mentor and he was my friend. And well, Sammy, if there are speakers up in heaven, this one's for you. Take us out.
I gotta be me. I gotta be me. What else can I be but what I am? Dream of life that keeps me alive. I gotta be me. He makes me what I am. A world of success is waiting for me if I settle down, won't settle for less. Then I can have it all. I'll go with I can't be right for somebody else if I'm somebody else